Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Saira Mujtaba and with me is Reshma Tiwari, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for intensifying Vocal for Local campaign on the occasion of Bapu's birth anniversary and the upcoming festive season. Prime Minister Modi extends greetings to his Israeli counterpart on Rosh Hashanah. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov backs India's bid for permanent seat in UN Security Council. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar says India will work with G20 members to address serious issues. Philippines on high alert as Super Typhoon Noru lashes its eastern islands. Storm Fiona batters Canada's coastline and causing power outages. Tropical storm Ian delays launch of NASA's most powerful moon rocket Artemis 1. Mahalaya being celebrated across Bangladesh as an invocation to goddess Durga for beginning of Durga Puja. In Italy, snap polls open to elect a new parliament. And in cricket, third and final T20 international between India and Australia underway in Hyderabad. And now the news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asked people to intensify Vocal for Local campaign on the occasion of Bapu's birth anniversary on the 2nd of October and the upcoming festive season. Addressing the nation in his Mann Ki Baat program on All India Radio on Sunday, Mr. Modi emphasized that people must buy local goods along with khadi, local handloom and handicrafts. Prime Minister Modi also hailed the people coming forward to adopt TB patients and taking the lead in ensuring a nutritious diet for these patients. The Prime Minister expressed happiness that the Chandigarh airport will now be named after Shahid Bhagat Singh on his birth anniversary, that is on 28th of September. Prime Minister Modi stressed on the need to increase awareness about Indian Sign Language. He expressed pride about India's rising success in para-sports. Mr. Modi stated that the United Nations has recognized and honored the India Hypertension Control Initiative that was started in 2017. The Prime Minister said that a task force has been formed to monitor the cheetahs that were recently released at Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh. He said national games are being organized in Gujarat from the 29th of this month. The Prime Minister also called this a very special occasion. Mr. Modi gave his best wishes to every player who will be participating. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has extended his greetings to the Prime Minister of Israel, Yair Lapid, people of Israel and the Jewish people around the world on the occasion of Rosh Hashanah. In a tweet, Mr. Modi hoped that this new year will bring good health, peace and prosperity to everyone.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said India will work with G20 members to address serious issues of debt, economic growth, food and energy security and environment. Dr. Jaishankar said this while addressing the 77th session of UN General Assembly in New York on Saturday. India will assume the presidency of the G20 for 1 year from the 1st of December this year to the 30th of November next year. The G20 is an intergovernmental forum of the world's major developed and developing economies. Dr. Jaishankar said the reform of governance of multilateral financial institutions will continue to be one of its core priorities. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on India's stand at United Nations. In conversation are Bhaswati Mukherjee, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
So today we are discussing the speech given by External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar in the United Nations General Assembly, and in his address to the high-level UNGA session, the External Affairs Minister spoke on a range of issues. He spoke about the UN reforms and he also indirectly pointed out the cross-border terrorism which India has been suffering for a long time and how some nations are also using the UN to stall the sanctioned terrorists in the UNSC. So we see that the minister's speech covered a lot of issues. Ambassador Mukherjee, when we see that the External Affairs Minister spoke quite strongly and he said that, India having borne the brunt of cross-border terrorism for decades, India firmly advocates a zero-tolerance approach. In our view, there is no justification for any act of terrorism regardless of motivation. And no rhetoric, however sanctimonious, can ever cover up blood stains. And how do you look at this statement? And of course, the minister is referring to the cross-border terrorism which India has been a victim of for many years.
I think that our External Affairs Minister was conveying India's principled position that in accordance with the UN Charter, you cannot have member states that nurture terrorists and encourage cross-border terrorism, which Pakistan has been doing for so many years. Moreover, Pakistan is currently on the FATF grey list and is desperately trying to get off the grey list. However, their argument that hardened terrorists are not being sheltered in Pakistani soil, in fact, going to the extent of saying that one of them is presently within Afghanistan under the protection of the Taliban, not only was strongly refuted by the Taliban spokesperson, but was not believed by anyone. So what India is trying to convey on one hand is that India has a principled position. India will continue to press the United Nations to take strong action against states that sponsor, nurture and strengthen cross-border terrorism, and that on the other hand, we will continue to push in the Security Council and outside that Pakistan continues to remain in the grey list. I think that is the message that External Affairs Minister was firmly conveying.
Ambassador Mukherjee, we also saw that this month China has put a hold on a proposal which was moved at the United Nations by the US and supported by India to designate the Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist Sajid Mir, who is wanted for his involvement in the 26/11 Mumbai terrorist attacks, as a global terrorist. And we see that Dr. Jaishankar in his address also said that the United Nations responds to terrorism by sanctioning its perpetrators. Do you feel that, and we have been seeing this for a very long time now, that China always uses its veto power at the UNSC whenever India has tried, even in the past, that to designate terrorists based in Pakistan as a global terrorist? How does one deal with this situation, and do you think China gets the message?
We've been trying to give this message for a very long time to the UN and to the People's Republic of China, that the manner in which they are blocking the effective functioning of a very important mechanism of the Security Council is most unfortunate, coming as it does from a P5 country with veto power. Time and again, and this is the latest example with regard to Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Chinese have blocked efforts by the US, by developed countries, by France, with supported by India, to designate these terrorist groupings and terrorists as international terrorists in accordance with the rules of the Security Council, and time and again it has been vetoed by China. So it is not very clear what the People's Republic of China is benefiting by trying to block this kind of identification, because on one hand, the Chinese themselves claim that they have got their own problems with regard to terrorism within China and on its borders. And on the other, they gave a very poor example of support to neighboring countries who are struggling to stop cross-border terrorism. So I think this is the message that we have given. Clearly, not that we are very confident or optimistic that the Chinese will listen to our message, given that they have a long history of supporting Pakistan, come what may, on such issues.
Ambassador Mukherjee, we also see that the Ukraine conflict also figured in the External Affairs Minister's address, and he said that as the Ukraine conflict continues to rage, we are often asked whose side we are on, and our answer each time is straight and honest. He also underlined that it is the collective interests of the international community to work constructively, both within the United Nations and outside, in finding an early resolution to this conflict. Do you feel that with the Ukraine conflict going on now for quite some time, and India's position has been quite clear, but this is also a position which in international forums does get questioned repeatedly. Do you feel that in the address the minister has once and for all also made it clear that where does India stand when it comes to the Ukraine conflict?
Actually, Only recently at the SCO summit, our Prime Minister, while meeting President Putin, had said in Hindi that ye yudh ka jug nahi hai. Of course, he said also other things, including the importance of the Russia connection for India. And what External Affairs Minister has said in the UNGA, when he says that India is on the side of peace and will remain firmly there, in a way he was reinforcing in a multilateral context what our Prime Minister had so beautifully articulated at the SCO, that India stands for rule-based order, that we stand on the side of peace. He said that we respect the UN Charter and its founding principles, and we call for dialogue and diplomacy as the only way out. He also underlined the problems that the Ukraine conflict has brought to the rest of the world, including India, because of the escalating cost of food, fuel and fertilizers, which only reinforces, External Affairs Minister said, the urgent need to find an early resolution to this conflict. In other words, our position is very clear. What Prime Minister said was also picked up by some important Western powers in the UN. We have clearly said that India stands for peace. We are on the side of peace. We want to work to bring an end to this conflict, and we want to have respect for the UN Charter and founding principles, which means, in other words, respect for territorial integrity of member states of the United Nations. We cannot possibly go back on that commitment. We've always stood for that. Given the fact that we have neighbors who don't respect our territorial integrity, how can India do any less than to reaffirm the UN Charter and the importance of territorial integrity of member states, and that naturally would include Ukraine. And that's very clear. We've said it very clearly.
Ambassador Mukherjee, we also see that the External Affairs Minister, he also spoke about the current setup of the United Nations and the need for urgent reforms. And he said that it is also perceived as deeply unfair, denying entire continents and regions a voice in a forum that deliberates their future. And we have also seen that the discussions on the reforms in the UN have been going on for quite some time, but we haven't really seen much movement on the ground level. We also saw that earlier this week, the minister hosted a meeting of the G4 countries, a grouping that includes Japan, Germany and Brazil, seeking a permanent seat at the Security Council. Do you feel that there is now a movement towards a reform of the UNSC, or do you think this is something which will kind of take even longer than what we have seen happening?
I am actually not very optimistic about early reform for two reasons. One is that those veto-holding powers in the Security Council, and that includes the People's Republic of China, have the right to veto any proposal with regard to opening up permanent membership in the Security Council. Then there is also a proposal which was floating around that you could include a second category of semi-permanent members, let's say for 10 or 15 years, but they would not have the veto. So then it would be like having three classes, like in a railway train, first, second and third class. Permanent with veto, semi-permanent without veto, and non-permanent. This again was something which was not appreciated by the G4. And then whenever the General Assembly moves forward on such a proposal, because such a proposal has to be approved by the General Assembly and the Security Council simultaneously, then you would find that there is always an effort by one or two countries in the General Assembly, led by China in the Security Council, that tries to push it back. And you rightly spoke about the G4. India has been a member of the G4, and India has repeatedly, along with other G4 countries, pointed out that the present membership of the Security Council is based on the power balance in the world post World War II. That is no longer the situation in 2022, where the world has completely changed, and the Security Council does not include any important emerging country, and that naturally includes Brazil, Germany and Japan, of course, are developed countries, Brazil and India. And it is true that the entire Latin American continent is not in the Security Council. For that matter, there is no African country in the Security Council, there is no Arab country in the Security Council, and India is not in the Security Council, nor is Japan, along with Germany. It's a very unsatisfactory state of affairs, but I think we're going to take some time to get there. I don't see, especially when the entire global community is deadlocked over Ukraine, I don't think that the moment right now is favorable for Security Council.
Ambassador Mukherjee, we also see that India will also begin the G20 Presidency in December, and the minister also referred to this in his address when he said that as we begin the G20 Presidency this December, we are sensitive to the challenges faced by developing countries. He also told the 193-member UN General Assembly that India will work with other G20 members to address serious issues of debt, economic growth, food and energy security, and particularly environment. How significant do you think is the G20 presidency going to be and the cooperation between them, with India taking over the presidency in December?
Our presidency of the G20 is of great importance because of the present situation in the world order, where you have so many crises and you also have the Ukraine-Russia conflict. If you look at the membership of the G20, given the fact that the Security Council has a very unbalanced membership, which doesn't reflect the true balance of power, the G20, on the other hand, is a grouping which reflects the true balance of power globally post-World War II. And you have in the G20 all the important developed countries and the Russian Federation. So I think that it provides an opportunity for India to look at extremely difficult economic challenges, as our External Affairs Minister pointed out and you just read out, which includes, of course, food and energy security and the environment. The reform of multilateral financial institutions, let's not forget, that is something, again, long pending, like the reform of the Security Council. And, of course, an effort to improve the atmosphere and to move the principal countries involved, that's Ukraine and the Russian Federation, to find an early end to this seemingly intractable conflict that seems to be continuing now since February this year in Ukraine. So our G20 presidency has been widely welcomed as crucial, and Prime Minister Modi is expected to give much leadership to the G20 at this important time in the world.
Ambassador Mukherjee, we also see that the External Affairs Minister, he framed India's position as a country prepared to take up greater responsibilities. Do you feel that this address to the UNGA and India's position, as we have discussed on various issues, also now proves the point that India is a major global player, and the UNSC reforms that we have discussed is something that should naturally happen now, and India should be given that position because it has emerged as one of the powerful global voices under Prime Minister Modi?
But absolutely. When External Affairs Minister made these remarks, he was talking in the context of the call for reformed multilateralism. In other words, reform of the Security Council. He was explaining that the current architecture, as I said earlier, is anachronistic and ineffective. In fact, it's completely outdated. As you rightly said earlier, entire continents have been denied a place in the Security Council. And we have made it clear through External Affairs Minister that we are a country, we are an emerged country. We are a very important voice in the international community. We are ready to take up those extra responsibilities. And what he didn't say, but what is clear is that we need to be accommodated in the high table of permanent members. Because only when you are a permanent member can you play the role that is intended for you as a major political and economic player. So it's not possible for India to be denied its seat in the Security Council forever, especially because our present term on the Security Council, 2-year term as a non-permanent member, will be ending in December this year. We will have to leave the Security Council. We finished our term, and usually these terms, non-permanent members, you get sometimes after a gap of 10, 15, 16, 17, 20 years. We've had very long gaps if you look at our tenures as non-permanent members. We have very long gaps because we have to negotiate with other non-permanent members in the Asia-Pacific group, Asia-Arab group, and there's a long list of candidates. It's not very clear when India will come back to the Security Council as a non-permanent member, which means our voice will not be heard in the Security Council post-December 22 unless there's reform of the Security Council. So it's quite urgent for the UN to do something about it.
And in the coming days, we will continue to follow the developments undertaking in the UNGA, and we will also continue our discussions on India's position on various issues. With this, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Welcome back. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Saturday backed India's candidature for a permanent member of the UN Security Council. While addressing the 77th UN General Assembly, Mr. Lavrov said that the Security Council will be more democratic if countries from Africa, Asia and Latin America are included. He said India and Brazil in particular are key international actors and should be counted for permanent membership in the Council. Addressing the Assembly, Lavrov accused the Western countries of throwing a fit through what he called illegal unilateral sanctions, which violate the UN Charter and hurt poor citizens in poorer countries. Earlier, India, with 31 other countries in a joint statement on reforms, stated that an expansion of the Security Council in both permanent and non-permanent categories, as well as reform in its working methods, is indispensable to making the body more representative, legitimate and effective, delegations reiterated. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has stressed on the need to continue to believe in the promise of diplomacy and the need for international cooperation. A report.
Addressing the 77th high-level session of the UN General Assembly in New York last night, the minister said the world must strive to return to the course of seeking peace, progress and prosperity. On Ukraine, India reiterated its stand on peaceful dialogue and diplomacy as key to resolve the Ukraine conflict. Dr. Jaishankar said Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the SCO summit, had asserted that India believed in a peaceful resolution and was concerned about the ongoing conflict. He said it is in collective interest to work constructively both within the UN and outside in finding an early resolution to this conflict. The minister said India is firm on a zero-tolerance approach to cross-border terrorism. He said India has borne the brunt of cross-border terrorism for decades. Dr. Jaishankar said there is no justification for any act of terrorism regardless of motivation. He said countries that defended proclaimed terrorists in the UN neither advanced their own interests nor their reputation. Dr. Jaishankar said India is confident under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. He said the government has resolved to make India a developed country in the next 25 years. The External Affairs Minister lauded India's economic growth in the past 75 years. He pointed out that colonialism had reduced India to one of the poorest nations, but today India is the fifth biggest economy in the world. Dr. Jaishankar further talked about India's COVID vaccine initiative that had aided over 100 nations. He said India is meeting its development targets as well as offering partnerships to nations in Asia, Africa and Latin America. The minister pointed out that in its pursuit of climate action and justice, India has worked with partners on the International Solar Alliance, the One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. He said India remains deeply committed to fighting climate change under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. The minister reaffirmed India's faith in the UN and its charter. He said India stands committed to strengthen its partnership with the United Nations to ensure a brighter future for the planet. Prashant Kumar Sinha for World News.
North Korea has fired a suspected ballistic missile off its east coast, South Korean military officials have said. This is the first known missile test since June, which comes after a U.S. aircraft carrier arrived in South Korea to participate in joint drills and ahead of a planned visit by Vice President Kamala Harris. Seoul mentioned the launch as an act of grave provocation. North Korea has been prohibited from ballistic and nuclear weapons tests by the UN. Mahalaya is being celebrated across Bangladesh as an invocation to Goddess Durga for the beginning of Durga Puja. The formal period of Durga Puja, running into 10 days, starts a day after the Mahalaya. The festivities will begin on the 6th day of the Puja on October 1 with Mahashashti. It will continue for 5 days till October 5, when the Puja will culminate with the immersion of the idols on the 10th day, Dashmi Puja. Mahalaya marks the end of the Pitra Paksh and the beginning of the Devi Paksha. Durga Puja is the largest festival of Hindus of Bangladesh. This year, 32,168 mandaps are being made across the country to celebrate the puja. Capital city Dhaka alone will have 241 Durga mandaps this year. In view of the incidents that occurred during Durga Puja in several districts of the country last year, the government has taken steps to ensure security of the puja mandaps.
Philippines is on high alert as Super Typhoon Noru lashes the country's eastern islands and has urged the civilians in high-risk areas to evacuate as soon as possible. Typhoon Noru is packing winds of up to 240 kilometers per hour after an explosive intensification as it hits the Polillo Islands and heads west towards the main island of Luzon. It could cause landslides, flash flooding and dangerous storm surges, including in the capital, Manila. The storm's intensity increased by 90 kilometers per hour in 24 hours, which according to forecasters is unprecedented. Power lines have been downed and houses washed into the sea after Storm Fiona battered Canada's coastline on Saturday and Sunday. The military has been deployed to Nova Scotia to help with the cleanup operation. Parts of 5 provinces experienced torrential rain and winds of up to 160 kilometers per hour with widespread flooding and power outage. Prime Minister Trudeau said that the military will be deployed to Nova Scotia to help the situation. Mr. Trudeau will no longer travel to Japan to attend the funeral of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, but will stay back to deal with the storm's aftermath.
The launch of NASA's most powerful moon rocket Artemis 1 has been delayed due to a tropical storm which could become a hurricane. The U.S. state of Florida faces a hurricane threat as Tropical Storm Ian has strengthened and could approach Florida early next week as a major hurricane. The rocket was expected to launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on Tuesday. The launch of the rocket had already been postponed twice. Its first launch failed at the end of August due to technical glitches, while a second attempt at the start of September was hampered by a fuel leak. On Saturday, Ian strengthened as it moved over the Caribbean. According to the Hurricane Center, its projected path takes it just south of Jamaica, over western Cuba and into Florida. According to forecasters, Florida Keys and South Florida could be hit by heavy rains on Monday. Italy underwent snap polls on Sunday to elect a new parliament. About 51 million Italians cast their votes for lawmakers in both the lower house, the Chamber of Deputies, and the Senate, the upper house of parliament. The voting will end late in the night on Sunday. By noon on Sunday, figures from the Interior Ministry, based on reports from 95% of Italian towns, showed that turnout had reached 19.1%, slightly down on the 19.5% reported at the same time during the 2018 elections.
In the third and final T20 Cricket International, India defeated Australia by 6 wickets in Hyderabad to clinch the series 2-1. Earlier, India won the toss and elected to field first. And now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The New York Times writes that Kyoto wants you back, but it has some polite suggestions.
Wall Street Journal reports that Italy's election frontrunner sheds far-right image, quotes the West.
Washington Post reports that Russia strikes Zaporizhzhia as staged referendums underway in occupied areas.
The Guardian writes that Ukraine war to take center stage at UN as West and Russia vie for support.
South China Morning Post reports Chinese envoy opposes foreign intervention in Horn of Africa on return to region.
The Financial Times observes that IMF bailouts hit record high as global economic outlook worsens.
And the Japan Times says North Korea launches missile ahead of US Vice President's visit to the region. And now a quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for intensifying Vocal for Local campaign on the occasion of Bapu's birth anniversary and the upcoming festive season. Prime Minister Modi extends greetings to his Israeli counterpart on Rosh Hashanah. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov backs India's bid for permanent seat in the UN Security Council. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar says India will work with G20 members to address serious issues. Philippines on high alert as Super Typhoon Noru lashes its eastern island. Storm Fiona batters Canada's coastline and causes power outages. Tropical Storm Ian delays launch of NASA's most powerful moon rocket Artemis 1. Mahalaya being celebrated across Bangladesh as an invocation to Goddess Durga for beginning of Durga Puja. In Italy, snap polls open to elect a new parliament. And in the third and final T20 Cricket International, India beat Australia by 6 wickets to clinch the series 2-1. And now before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Mexico. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.